I'm sure most of you smiled and nodded when you read the session's title, The Marketing Conundrum, given how much everything from social media to business as well as behavior is changing thanks to the pandemic and digitization. And the overwhelming amount of data that we have now doesn't make it any easier, right? And especially in this emerging landscape, Dipali Nair, hi Dipali, who's going to actually do all the brain picking for us in this session, will also have much to say herself. She's the Chief Marketing Officer of IBM India and runs a very interesting podcast on Awaaz.com called Being CEO that delves into their professional lives and explores both their valiant as well as vulnerable sides. So, Dipali, over to you.
Thank you, Pooja. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yes, very well.
Okay, wonderful. So, with me, of course, as your screen showed, I have two absolutely wonderful people who are both marketeers and book authors. So, first, let me introduce Jessie. Jessie Paul, she's, of course, a marketing expert. She's the founder and CEO of a marketing advisory firm. She's a board member at multiple companies now, a public speaker, an author. But I think the most important thing for me is she's my dear friend. Her first book, was published in 2009, No Money Marketing. And she's doing another one with Bloomsbury this year. And I'm eagerly waiting for to see the book in the bookstores. It's called Marketing Without Money. So, Jessie, I'm really looking forward to the discussion today that we're going to have. And with that, let me also introduce Dr. Karthik Nagendra. He is the author of Thought Starters, the author and CEO of Thought Starters. He's also co-founder of Pink Ladder. He is the author of the book, The Thought Leader Way. Of course, he's an award-winning marketing consultant, serial entrepreneur. He has about 2 decades of experience, and his expertise in strategy, marketing, operations, and HR is also going to be very, very relevant today. Before I ask them a question, I just wanted to paint a picture where, Pooja started and said, too much data has happened, and, that's what she was alluding to. And that's where I want to talk about. We are living in times, where not just the future, but the present too is uncertain. And that's not just because of the pandemic, that's also as a result of the fact that technology has done a lot of leapfrogging. So as a result, business models are changing with all kinds of efficiency and not just economic. On the consumer side, consumers are deluged with content. And marketing, is extremely important to create that content, but also to create awareness and consideration for the brand. And the marketing job does not just end there, not just at awareness consideration. Today when I look at my job, it is to create an intent, and then it has to be followed by a purchase or a sale, and then the customer retention cycle starts. So if you look at a marketer's dream, my dream, it'll be to nurture the relationship with my customers such that they become my brand advocate. I also think it's an endless process. It just goes on and on, because somebody or the other is climbing the boat, at some point of time. And the risk that we run is not getting enough ROI, so therefore there is a constant need to keep up with the emerging technologies and consumer insights, both. So I want to therefore start the panel discussion, given this context. So, Jessie and Karthik, when I want to talk to you about, the whole marketing space, I also want to talk to you about the CMO, as a C-suite, person. And I was reading an article recently, and it spoke about roles and responsibilities of CMO inside a company and how they're shifting. But I think the more important thing for me was, one Korn Ferry study, which said that the average tenure of a CMO is the lowest of all C-suite titles, and it went on to say that's because the chief marketing officer's role is increasingly complex. It requires strategic thinking, also tactical acumen across functions, and therefore there is a huge disparity in what the companies expect from the CMOs. So Jessie, let me come to you first. You are a marketing expert. You've been a CMO before. You interact with a lot of CMOs across industries. What is your thought on this aspect of their changing role, the fact that their life is too short, and what do you say? What do you have to say here?
So thanks so much, Dipali, and great setup for this conversation. So this whole thing that this tenure of the CMO is shrinking has been going on for years and years, right? But that's of course the average CMO, and we are not the average CMO, right? So that's one to keep in mind. But one of the reasons for the shortening tenure was that marketing became more about sales and demand generation and not about the brand or any long-term thinking. And anyone in the marketing space knows that you can only do so much before your brand falls apart. So it's a lucky CMO who comes in on a well-built brand and then can show all this wonderful demand gen and get the benefits. And he's smart enough to run before the brand collapse is evident in his results. So I think that is one reason why a lot of marketers have actually been swinging around. The second reason they swing around is that India has a massive shortage of CMOs. And I was just looking at the numbers. I mean, India has 1.26 million registered companies. And any form of marketer, we do not have 1.26 million, right? And number of reasons which we can go into if we have time. The second is that I think every year something like 15,000 startups are also getting qualified under Startup India. So where do these 15,000 CMOs come from? They don't. So it's just a rotating thing where you jump from company to company before your sins catch up with you. So that's one. Having said that, there is a new study by Duke University which says that now everybody has decided that the marketing person is responsible for digital transformation more than any other function.
Yes.
And that is actually a sign of hope, because that's solid, can show results pretty quickly. And maybe the marketer will be allowed to go back to also building some brand in his spare time. And that might lead to more respect, more longevity for the marketer. And it's a good trend because I think it started during the pandemic when it was a desperate need. Everybody needed to do digital, and they found this fellow and said, hey, you know something about MarTech, why don't you expand, own the customer, all that good stuff. But if the trend continues, you might see that. And secondly, if he's able to, or he or she is able to put in more automation, then potentially a marketer can also scale. But I do believe that some of this churn is not because a marketer is doing badly, but because they have 30% pay hike, 40% pay hike attracting them elsewhere.
Thank you, Jesse. That's interesting numbers. 1.26 million companies, 15,000 new startups every year. And are there that many CMOs? And therefore shortage of CMOs. And thank you also for saying that, look, not everybody is a good CMO. You use the word average, So I think there's a difference between a CMO and an experienced CMO, who's actually, as I call, come up from the school of hard knocks. I think the second very interesting thing that you said is that a CMO is also today being asked to do digital transformation. And I just want to add there, and get Karthik's opinion on that. I think the other bit is that they're also being asked to look at the overall customer experience. And that itself is also expanding what marketing is supposed to do. I don't know whether that is good news or bad news. But a CMO has to do a lot more today. And the pressure on the ROI, the pressure on, working with sales or actually delivering sales is an additional pressure. Karthik, I wanted to get your take on what, Jesse said and what I have commented about.
Thanks, Deepali, for setting that context. And I know Jesse is the marketing guru here and I'm the student. So I will still try to add some perspective there. Definitely the role of the CMO is changing, and maybe there could be a time where he or she may not be called CMO anymore at all, right? So it could be probably the Chief Customer Experience Officer or
yes.
Chief Customer Success Officer, right? The terminologies could vary. What I also see the issue being is on the skill set perspective, right? So if you look at, and I teach at a lot of MBA colleges also, and if you look at the curriculum itself, it is still so old school.
Yes.
They've just added something called digital marketing, but actually the person who's teaching that digital marketing himself or herself hasn't done that there, right? So that's what you're looking at. So then you may say, okay, there are a lot of these online courses which are available, so I do those online courses, get certified and move ahead. But not all online courses are equally good. So you may have a certificate, but you're not employable as yet. So if those are the ranks that are coming up, then I really don't understand how they will be able to do a digital transformation as well, right?
Sure.
Earlier, marketing was generally for people who are either very good at communication or they were creative. But now the marketing person is required to understand technology, is required to understand numbers, is required to understand analytics, those models, etc. Right? So virtually it's like you're a superman or superwoman.
Yeah, you need both right brain,
right brain and
left brain.
right. So that makes it a lot more complex. And unless there is change at the grassroots level, I think we're going to have a serious issue going forward with the way things are changing. And there's going to be the dearth of talent pool per se. So it's not so much of expiry date, but it's more of are you even employable and relevant?
Yeah, so you're both making a point that there's going to be shortage of good CMOs, except that the CMOs may not exist as CMOs at all. They may morph into a chief customer experience officer or even chief growth officer, or some other term that it might take. So Jesse, I think the segue that I have here is that the role of the CMO is changing. I think we already established that they need to do a lot more and a lot many different things. I also find that the marketing landscape itself is evolving. I mentioned earlier that the customer is very different today, and therefore the customer insights are different. And Karthik alluded to the fact that you need both right brain thinking and left brain thinking, right? Now, with all these changes that are happening in marketing, CMO needs to change, market is changing, customer is changing. I mean, I'm just thinking about the brand and the organization. Is that good news? Can marketing help organization, grow? That's the question that I really have for you, Jesse, here.
So, I like to say nothing has changed since the first cave man, woman wanted to sell a wheel, right? It's the same. The principles, I mean, we all write wonderful books and everything, but the principles are the same. Someone needs to know that you exist. They should want to buy it because it is better than something else. And you have to fulfill whatever you promise to them. Everything else is just, the technology varies and all of that good stuff. What is changing in the market today is that the friction to reaching your customer, communicating to your customer has dramatically reduced, and the friction for customers to talk to each other and to you has dramatically reduced. So there's no asynchronous knowledge. I mean, that's kind of going away. And I talk about this in my book, and that is really good for you, because if I can talk one-to-one with my customers, nothing like it. Now, yes, the role of the marketer is changing, but we continue to have the basic problem of how do you know that this product exists? Your product may be wonderful, but I still need someone to orchestrate awareness. I still need someone to develop an interest in this thing, because I can see that you exist, but why should I consider you? So that's where thought leadership comes in, or whatever else comes in. And then I should want you to prefer me over all the other fellows in the market. How do I do that? So that doesn't change. And these are age-old principles with new tools being applied. Do we need sales is a question that I would really ask. Why should we separate the sales and the marketing function? I see a question from Gopal Krishna saying that, look, marketing carries sales target. Absolutely. And I don't see why not, because if everything is digital, you reduce the friction. Marketing or whoever is the chief orchestrator of the brand can very well own the sales target as well. And, I always like to talk about Peter Drucker, who talked that there are only two functions of an organization: marketing and innovation. So marketing can pretty much take over awareness, interest, desire, and acquisition. And innovation is, of course, product delivery, etc.
Yeah.
So see, I've simplified life for everybody. You just need two people in the organization, CEO and CMO.
Thanks for that, Jesse. And there's another question there. So before I come back to Karthik, I just want to take care of that. Jitendranath asked saying, are these views only B2B? And I'm saying no. And I'm saying that out of personal experience, Jesse, because I have transitioned from being a CMO with an insurance company, to a holiday company. I used to work for, L&T Insurance, which is now part of HDFC. and I used to work for Mahindra Holidays, and now I work in a B2B company. And digital transformation and all the stuff that Jesse and Karthik spoke about, have made a difference to the business at all these companies. The way customer experience the product and the brand, the way you run retention and loyalty, the way you look at the profit model now, the way you look at sales structure and the sales process. I think digital transformations impacted every element of the businesses, not just in the B2B domains, but in the B2C domains also. This is only because, Jitendranath asked that question. Karthik, while I am also talking about examples, I want to ask you also, any examples or organizations that come to your mind who've taken advantage of these changes,
Okay. So I'm currently, consulting for a company which looks into organic certification. So they primarily work with a lot of the farmers community, farmer groups, among others. So while I was researching, certain aspects of how to engage better with the farmers community, I came across this campaign of Me Plus Moo. It was an app that was created by 5G Rural First. So it's an initiative which is supported by Cisco. So it was very interesting because traditionally the way you look at the farmer or the rural community, you say they are not tech savvy, right? So the way you interact with them, the way you engage with them, or the way you promote your service or your product to them has to be very old school.
Yeah.
Right? And here we are also talking about 5G, coming into India and globally as well. So through this campaign, what they've actually done is to communicate the benefits of 5G. So how did they do that? Is they created this app called the Moo app, which was easily downloadable, by the farmers on their smartphones. And interestingly, while I was working with this company which is into certification, I also noticed that there are so many of farmers who actually have smartphones. So it is not that they don't have smartphones and they're still holding feature phones out there. So they created this app. They promoted it through various farming industry, farming publications, which got them coverage. So basically, what the farmer had to do is download this app. It was connected through an IoT device to the cow, and through that they would be able to monitor a lot of the health, wellness, and even the location of where the herd was. And on top of that, they also had a lot of content, educational content, which was available through video blogs, even the farmers sharing their experiences, some experts sharing their experiences on how to go about doing this. So it gave them that entire field. So if you look at from a digital engagement standpoint, this is such an interesting example of looking at a sector which is traditionally non-tech savvy and then bringing them on board. And, I think the opportunities are unlimited. So this is one example which I could think of.
Yeah, totally. And I just look around me. My mom often, when she looks at me ordering something on an e-commerce app or even a food delivery app, and then the payment gets done through, a wallet, she actually says that she's 75 and she says, "This is magic." Okay, so I mean, imagine the distance that we've traveled in that time, and marketeers have had a role to play. So just wanted to outline that, With that, Jesse, and I know, Ben has asked also this question, so I'm going to get to that. So you both are successful authors, and I have specific questions, therefore, on the areas that you've covered in your respective books, So Jesse, I think yours is the most hot and happening thought that everybody, engages with, the board members, CEOs, startup founders, everybody. Marketing without money. So I just want you to tell us the premise of the book. Where does this come from? How can you market without money? Or let's say, how can you do marketing with a very, very low budget? So
Right.
we're really
First of
questioning
all-
the tenet of your book. Okay.
So first of all, the whole idea is that you market with less money than your competition, not necessarily with zero. And the original thinking and ideas were actually at Infosys, which nobody now considers as a hard-strapped company. But when I worked there, I mean, we would be told to compete with Accenture, and pretty much Accenture's, or even IBM for that matters, marketing budget was greater than our entire revenue. And I would be like, we have a small challenge over here. So this was, when Tiger Woods was there and,
Yeah.
Deep Blue was competing with Gary Kasparov, and they had that kind of money and we didn't. So how do you still build a brand? So it takes some of those ideas which worked in Infosys or iGate or later on even at Wipro, and I try to distill some frameworks. And generally, what we can say is there are two parts which will help you to save money. One is if you can reduce your message. And this is not just if you don't have money. In general, you would be more effective if instead of talking about 5 attributes, you could talk about 1.
Yes.
Your choice of that one attribute can make a huge deal of difference.
Yeah.
And the second principle is that if I can reach less number of people and still meet my target, then that also reduces your cost, because awareness generally is the most expensive aspect of marketing.
Yep.
So I'll give you a simple example, which also actually ties into Karthik's area of expertise, which is recently there was this whole stuff about Sebamed, right? So Sebamed decided to go full on against, say, a Unilever and say, your soap sucks, mine is better. But they were really, really clear about who is their target audience and why is their soap better.
Yeah.
So they brought up this concept of pH and how skin pH and their pH are all good, and they threw in a lot of numbers. It was very thought leadership material for a soap. And because of that, people know only one thing about Sebamed. Only pH is all we know. We don't know anything else about it. But that's a great stick to beat a large brand which has fragrance, which has this. And of course, Unilever tried to fight back and say, oh, but we have this, we have that, which they do. But that's the beauty of a challenger. I just have one stick to beat up all of your other attributes with. From a target audience, again, Sebamed is tiny, right? They only sell in pharmacies. If they can get even a 1% out of somebody else, that's doubling their market share. They're cool. They're good with this.
Yeah.
So that is actually where it works. So again, if you take B2B, same story. If I come in and say I'm the world's best SI, I mean, people are like, there are many like you. I don't need to come to you. But if I come and tell you that I'm the best person for a small retailer who wants to, go digital on their supply chain in North America, preferably in Dallas, oh yeah, then I've got the right audience and I have one message to tell you. And I'll tell you that, the big guys have money and everything, but they don't care about you. I care about you, right? And for me, 10 clients a year is sufficient and I will meet my growth targets. So that's actually the key to effective marketing. Reduce your message or distill it to that one message that matters most to the audience that matters to you, and be really clear about who is this audience that matters to you. The rest of the book really covers what are the levers we can use, how do you go about doing this. That is all there. And of course, like a good marketer, I would like you to buy my book to find out more about that.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's my appeal to everyone. Please do so. The new edition's coming in December, Jessie?
Yep.
So, yeah. So please, and buy the first edition now, and buy the updated new case studies edition.
Yeah, so here's my old edition, and I would like you to buy the new edition.
Yes, please. Okay. No, I'm telling them to buy both, yeah, Jessie. Okay, buy the new one. And Jessie, interestingly, I run the podcast, right? And there's been $0 spent on that podcast till date, and it's a very successful show. It is their second best-selling show on the platform. They have about 1 million listeners. I also have the highest retention rate, and that goes to what you said about Peter Drucker. He said innovation and marketing. But I think the retention is all about the innovation that has been done. While most of their other podcasts were in the 45-minute to 60-minute space, I actually did a podcast in 30 minutes, and some other, innovation, of course, and the content is great. And I would request people to say, okay, please do listen to my podcast. Just find out Being CEO with Deepali Nair, and Nair is spelled with the double A. If you Google it, you'll come to my podcast. And like our previous two young authors were saying, we are all three of us are very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Please find us. And your book is actually about, thought leadership, right? Thought leadership in building a brand. And to me, that is actually like a way of doing this marketing without money. How do you market without money? And I think thought leadership is one is one a great tenet. Not to say that everybody can't do it, everybody has to do it, but I think it's one of the tenets of, according to me, marketing without money. What do you think? Your take on what thought leadership, in building a brand is all about?
Sure. So interestingly, there's a report which I was reading, which says that about 89% of B2B buyers actually look for thought leadership of the service provider as a key evaluation criteria, and about 42% of them are willing to pay a premium for brands which are demonstrating that well. But just 15% actually demonstrate it well. So I interact with a lot of B2B technology companies, and what I notice is, everybody does not understand what thought leadership is all about. I know it's the most abused word. Even on LinkedIn, if you were to search thought leader, you'll have over 1 million people who would have it in their bio somewhere saying they're a thought leader or something, but it is too abused. So pure thought leadership will actually require you to have that unique perspective. Are you seeing things differently? Are you seeing, the problem probably which your customer is not aware of under the surface? And how forward thinking are you? What is the kind of investment you're making from an innovation and R&D standpoint, right? So thought leadership is not just about content. Yeah, content marketing is a subset of that. There are a lot of these other elements also which you need to leverage, and some of them definitely don't cost money as well. So content, obviously good content, and if you have a good point of view, obviously your podcast also that you talk about, because it's got good content out there, so obviously you have better stickiness, right? So that does not cost you good amount of money. Second, if you were to be part of any advisory panels or association boards, so that again is thought leadership, and that does not cost you money. If you have an expertise, people will reach out to you and say, will you be part of our advisory board, right? So that is thought leadership. Winning awards. And again, I'm not talking about awards where you just pay and get the award, but awards which actually evaluate you for what you do and what you've contributed there, right? And all this actually takes time. Thought leadership is not built overnight. So I still remember the book launch of Jessie, and I had my signed copy from her, where I still remember she's saying for the future thought leader. And this happened in 2009. And by the time I could publish my book, it was 2020, right? So it's been a long journey. It has to be more systematic, more sustained. And in my book, I talk about what you should be doing to do that. So there are some frameworks, there are examples that companies or individual brands, personal branding also. So even that is a brand, and you can build thought leadership using some of the insights which I've given in the book, The Thought Leader Way. So I would encourage the viewers to pick a copy of that. And whether you're an independent consultant, you're a startup, or you're a mid-sized firm or anything, there is something for each one of you there.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Karthik. I will just add to what you're saying. Everything you said is absolutely golden, golden words. I'll just add and say sometimes brands need to think long term.
Yeah.
And they need to provide thought leadership, especially in the FMCG space. I look at that space and find it lacking, They need to generate conversations which are category building, which are, educational in nature. They need to become a resource today. This is a new world, content is king today. This is a new world. They need to be able to, master that ability of being able to, provide content, in the relevant space. Simple example that comes to my mind is that Surf is, let's say, a category leader. I'm imagining they're a category leader, in the laundry space. But, are they thought leaders in the laundry space? Just by saying Daag Achhe Hain does not make you a thought leader, but I want to be able to Google, and I don't want to be able to Google. I want to be very sure and go to surf.com and find, answers to all my queries on laundry and stains and so on and so forth. I think that's another opportunity that brands, should think about. I have some more questions for you, but Ben, posted a question for me. Somebody's asking, what's the purpose
There are
of
many
my
questions.
Yeah, there's
yeah,
many questions
so
in there.
I'm gonna pick up a few
Yeah,
of them. So I'm being asked what's the purpose of my podcast and does it have a business model? Is it free? So very quick, Avaz.com is, like almost like a Star TV, and they host many podcasts over there. They have an advertising revenue model. So it is a content, website, and you can also do product placement, if I may use the term, inside, podcasts. My podcast is a thought leader, way for them also, because they actually use my podcast to demonstrate to brands and to newer content creators on how it's to be done. There have been opportunities for us where a brand wanted to do product placement with us, but we felt just now, I think this is not the brand that we want to be associated with. So we're going to wait for, let's say, a better and a bigger brand, to come in over there. Karthik, there's a question for you here. What are the top 3, thought leadership program activity? But I feel that you've kind of answered that by talking about, awards and, participation in industry bodies. Is there anything else that you want to cover there?
Yeah, one other thing which people generally don't utilize much is actually university collaborations. So, and in fact, this was a model which we tried at Wipro, and it was quite successful. So, what we did was, obviously at that point of time, for Wipro to go and say we are a thought leader in XYZ area, somebody had to endorse that and say, yeah, they've done something good. We had very interesting stories, but nobody had endorsed it from that standpoint. So the program which I created was basically reaching out to these Ivy League universities and teaching case studies written on some of these innovations and business model innovation or process innovation that we had done, or co-authoring articles along with the faculty for our business unit heads. Now, the faculty also are always looking out for new teaching case studies which they want to use, or they have to constantly publish papers. So they're also looking at, and so it's a win-win proposition there. So that's something which companies or brands can explore.
Yeah. Thanks. And Jesse, there's a question for you, and very interesting one. It's asking you, how did your first book do in terms of sales, and what are you tweaking in the second edition?
So one is that, that one did well, but that was a while ago. And that was pre-Kindle, if it's possible to believe those days. So definitely this is made for the new digital audience and the new digital marketplace. So the changes are, one is it definitely embraces far more of the digital reality of today. And also the case studies, etc., are very different because again, the world has changed. And so, for example, I would have an interview with an ID Foods, which is not really there. And it's also shifted because at that time, my exposure was primarily to B2B, whereas now it is much more broad-based because, of the consulting engagements. So that would be the main differences. But I would say that, look, the book is relevant for anyone who has to either do their own marketing strategy and plan, or anyone who's supervising. And if you come back to the original start of our discussion, I think a lot of people are in that boat. They may not realize it, but in the current market, and this is something I do tell people who come to me saying, can you refer one CMO? That's one common thing.
Yeah.
Brands attract brands. So it's a chicken and egg. No CMO, good one, wants to join you because you don't have a brand.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have a brand because you don't have a good CMO. So you have no choice but to do it yourself. And, actually, I gave this advice to one startup, and he actually promptly went and got himself best places to work. He got himself a Glassdoor rating. And then he put that Glassdoor rating on his full page ad, attracting people to work near the beach. He said, nobody's heard of my product, nobody cares, but I'm near the beach.
So he worked on what we call the talent brand these days. He worked on the talent brand aspect.
So I do see question on micro marketing, mass marketing. Absolutely. So you could do what this guy did and said, look, my audience is someone who wants to work by the beach, doesn't really give a damn about my product. It's fine.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm advertising, full page will attract a better marketer than otherwise. So those are some tricks.
So Jessie,
Yeah.
I want you to take on another question that Saundari is asked, and it's a very according to me it's a very intelligent question, but she's probably answered it herself. She says, chasing vanity matrix and content creation. How do you kind of keep a balance on this? And the struggle of the entrepreneurs and startups is that they have to chase some amount of social media matrix when they should they be looking at strategy.
You have to have a strategy before you go out and do communication.
Yeah.
And this is something just this morning I was explaining to someone else who signed up a PR agency and everything and hasn't done a strategy piece.
Yeah.
I said, look, PR, communication, social, they're all like a spray can. You put in the paint, it goes out and sprays very efficiently, no doubt. But if you did not choose that thing that you put in, the right color of paint to start with, then your entire thing is wasted.
Yeah.
So it's not about the vanity metrics or anything. For a smaller brand today, your only choice is social media because you cannot afford mass media. So it is your ad campaign. So if your ad campaign is like the old, how many people saw it, how many people clicked, how many people did something, that's not a vanity metric. It's genuinely your ad metric. And just one parting thought is that earlier, there was this whole John Wanamaker, and I quote him in my book as well, who used to say that, oh, half of my advertising is wasted. I just don't know which half. But today you don't even have that excuse. You know exactly which one was wasted.
Absolutely.
If you're continuing to do it, then there is something, it's that old insanity definition.
Sure. And another question for Karthik or for you, whoever wants to take it. This is any thoughts on marketing of or for social sector organizations?
Yeah, I can take that. So,
yes, Karthik.
Interestingly, thought leadership also plays a part even in the social sector. So there was this one client I was working for, which primarily was looking into skill building for tier 2, tier 3 youth and enabling them to become entrepreneurs there. So it was basically a foundation-led initiative. And there we created this entire concept of Rubenomics. So basically rural urbans. So people in the rural field with urban aspirations. And how does the entire economics plays out there? We created a framework out of that. There was, we collaborated and did some research around that, and that got presented at the Stanford Social Innovation Conference. And subsequently, Rubenomics became a hot term, and then there was a lot more programs which were built around that. So I think there is scope for thought leadership across sectors, whether it is B2B, B2C, social. All you need to have is a unique point of view, or looking differently at the situation, and a forward-looking perspective on what can be done, and investing in that journey.
Yeah. And that was just the right question that Jessie's already answered on the chat on community building. She's the queen of community building in the country. And so Karthik, there's another question for you.
I think you have a massive community.
Thank you. And I'm gonna come to Karthik to ask him a question, which I'm going to also put to you, Jessie. So we've all touched on this is not an audience question, this is my question. Okay, we've all touched upon the role of the CMO. It's changing. Okay, we've touched on thought leadership, we've touched on changing environment, changing customer. The one element that's connected to all these factors is the marketing team and the skill sets. The CMO cannot do it alone, So Karthik, what's your thought? What's the right balance in terms of diversity of skills or diversity of people? What do you think on the marketing team?
So diversity of skills, definitely that needs to be relooked right now, because earlier you would primarily look at, a PR person, a website person, right, a content person or an account-based marketing person. But now I think you need to start looking at from a UI UX person, an analytics person, a technology specialist person. So I think the entire DNA of the marketing team will change, number one. From a diversity standpoint, I think most marketing teams, in fact, have a good balance. In fact, sometimes you have more women in the team than men. And in fact, at Wipro also, I remember that's how it was. We had more women in the team than men out there. So and that's typically there. So I think that aspect is fine. But more from the skill set standpoint, I think the avatar of the new marketing team will be very different going forward.
Thank you. And Jessie, I think this probably is the last question of the day. Anonymous attendee put out a question and it's disappeared also. It says...
I answered that, but if you don't mind, Dipali, I will answer the ones on how do you market a festival,
Yes, please.
which I think is from the team putting together this one itself.
Yes.
So, couple of things. I think if I were to market a book festival, I would actually treat the books as a support point or as a prop, and just run it like any other festival, which is an exchange of ideas and has networking and all of that. So it is just, you know, let's talk about some interesting ideas. And the books are really, great props to design the agenda.
Yeah.
But this is not, we don't have to sell books in the festival. We just have to have engaging conversations, get to know each other. So, and I actually had put together, so I used to run a lot of events at one point. And so whether it was in my corporate life or even my, later on
also.
as a call writer.
Yeah.
So I actually put down a checklist of what do people want from an event, and from both sides. If you're an organizer, if you're a sponsor, and if you're an attendee.
Yeah.
I think that holds true for every single event, whatever type it is. And
Yes.
you just have to plug in your bits into that. It doesn't change. So that's one. And the other one was on social marketing and how was that different? So I actually did a workshop for someone who works with only social entrepreneurship things, and he's a VC fund. So his challenge was, how do I raise money? And I'm special because I'm a social company. Actually, no one else thinks you're special.
Yeah.
So, we say we're a social enterprise, but you're competing for mind space with everyone else.
Yeah.
So you have to do marketing like everyone else. So I do see, for example, LinkedIn posts saying, hey, you guys should buy Diwali gifts from, let's say, Mitti Cafe, which is an awesome enterprise. But then I also see someone else saying, hey, but what about the weavers here or those things there? So even in the social enterprise space, it's so competitive that unfortunately the winner is one who does the marketing better.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring this to the end, with this answer that you've given, Jessie. Fantastic. I'm only going to recommend to, both you and Karthik, not just your book. Since we are at a literary festival, let this come as a surprise to you. I'm of course free to mention books that I like, but in the context of what you said, I want to refer that article which was written in the 70s by Theodore Levitt in Harvard Business Review. Marketing myopia. I really request everybody to, go read that article. It's fantastic reading on, marketing. And apart from Jessie's book and Karthik's book, my other favorite books is also The Blue Ocean Strategy, once again, which talks about the fact which Jessie alluded to, which is that, you are selling your stuff in the midst of everything. So my podcast can't be classified only as a business podcast. It can compete with an entertainment podcast also. But Karthik and Jessie, this is the last, and after this, we're going to say good night. Your favorite book, Jessie, apart from your own?
Yeah, okay, that's kind of hard. So Gone with the Wind got me my job, so I still love it.
Wonderful.
And Dan Ariely.
Lovely.
So on the business book side, yeah, I'd say those. And of course, the 4 Ps from Kotler have been kind of, God's gift to my career. So yeah, I love the man.
Okay, tough thing to ask Karthik now after that list. But Karthik, has she left out anything?
Yes, I still have myself. So one is, what got you here won't get you there.
Yes, Marshall Goldsmith. Yes, Marshall absolutely.
Goldsmith. Absolutely, yes. I love that. Then the other book I like is Man's Search for Meaning. So that's the other book which I like. And third one is called Factfulness.
Yes.
So that was also a very interesting book which I read.
Yeah.
It changes your perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jessie and Karthik. Thank you for giving us a list of books. Thank you, Ben, for inviting us over here. Good night, and have a great time reading books and discussing books.
Thanks so much, Dipali, for hosting, and Karthik, it's great to see you again.
Yeah,
yes, Dipali, thanks.
I have to catch a flight, so I'm really logging off. Bye-bye.
Wow, that's great. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, all of you. And thanks for the suggestion for the Literature Festival too.